about 400 to 500 million people in a world of how many? A world of 7 billion. What are the rest of them doing? The rest of them are focusing on other things other than internal conflict and wars. They're focusing on creating wealth within their countries. And wealth is not a dirty word. Wealth means you're creating an economy that produces the wherewithal for people to have jobs, the wherewithal for people to educate their children, the wherewithal for people to have proper housing and health care and clean water and food and all the other necessities and ambitions of life. That's what wealth creation does. And even though you will read about all of these problems, the things to keep in mind, in the last 20 or 30 years, hundreds of millions of people have been brought up out of poverty. Hundreds of millions of people have been brought underneath democratic systems. There are more people living under democracy and freedom today than there have ever been in the history of the world. There are more countries, nations, who are living under representative forms of government than we've ever seen before. It's hard to believe that in my lifetime I have seen this kind of a change. Because when I started out in the Army 53 years ago after leaving the City College of New York, it was an entirely different world. It was a world where we were worried about thermonuclear war. We were worried about an empire behind the Iron Curtain called the Soviet Union. We were worried about another empire behind the bamboo curtain, China. And we thought that they felt they were so much better than us. They had an ideology that was superior to us. And our response to it was to contain them, hold them back behind the Iron Curtain, hold them back behind the bamboo curtain until they realized that their system was not going to work. Meanwhile, we will build up our armies. We will put hundreds of thousands of men in Europe and Asia. We will build nuclear weapons. At one time, America had in its arsenal 28,000 nuclear weapons. And for the majority of my adult life, I worried about this conflict. I worried about the possibility of war with the Soviet Union and with China. As a young lieutenant, they sent me to the Iron Curtain, a place called Fulda in Germany. And they took me up to the gap where Fulda was, where we thought the Russian army would come through. And my commander said to me, you guard between these two trees with your 40 soldiers. And when the Russian army comes, you stop it. Hey man, no problem, I'm from New York, this ain't no big deal. You know? And I did that for 2 years, thereby successfully preventing World War III from breaking out. I'm the man who did it. I stopped it. Now, 28 years go by. And in that 28-year period, I spent 2 years in Vietnam fighting an extension of what we thought was the Chinese Empire. I spent a year in Korea guarding the demilitarized zone against the North Koreans. And then after 28 years of going back and forth, they sent me back to Germany. This time I was a corps commander, and I had 70,000 soldiers under my command. But the mission was the same. Guard the Fulda Gap, a slightly wider section now, but guard the Fulda Gap, and when the Russian army comes through, you stop it. No problem. I've been training to do this for 28 years. I know exactly how to do it. And that was the world I knew. That was the world that I grew up in. A world with the prospect of thermonuclear war. A world where the whole world was separated into different parts, never to meet with each other. Never to see an assemblage of young people such as we have here tonight. Never to hear Russians talk to me as I heard tonight. People of Russian origin, people from China, people from other parts of the world. That was the world that I grew up in. That's the world that existed for most of the last 50 or 60 years. And then that world suddenly began to change. I remember vividly when it changed in my life. There I was a soldier, spent all this time preparing to fight, either in the East or in the West. And then suddenly I was no longer in a military position. I was selected to be President Reagan's National Security Advisor. President Reagan was a remarkable individual, a remarkable president. What made him so different is that he was a great leader who believed in himself. If you want to be successful in life, if you want to be great leaders, first and foremost, you have to believe in yourself.